All right, in Let's Spar, I always let my guest decide whether they'd like to go first. First up, can you teach an old dog new tricks?
Yes, yes, you can teach an old dog new tricks. And nobody can say that with more conviction than me because I was an old dog and I got taught a new trick. Not just a new trick, but I got taught 15 different types of choreographies from standard ballroom choreography to Latin dancing to contemporary dancing to, believe it or not, hip hop. And this at a point in my life where not only my fitness was zero, but also my psychological makeup was not great. And it wasn't because I was, old. It was just because that's where I was in my life. However, I was 47 and I started from scratch with dancing, and it absolutely took off for me. And that's why I know for sure that you can teach an old dog new tricks. I learned
Well,
many,
I agree
and
that
they
in your case, you were able to start something new at an advanced age, but that's really an anecdotal story. That's not evidence of why this statement is false. This cliche stands true. I mean, all cliches have a grain of truth in them, and that's or they wouldn't become cliches. This one means that people are reluctant or unwilling to change because they're set in their ways. They're unwilling to embrace new possibilities because what they've done until that point in their life has worked. And it's kind of like we give them credit for learning from their life experiences, and we call it wisdom. But then when people kind of reach a certain age in their life and they're set in their ways, they've figured things out, you know, it makes sense that we would get stuck in our ways and be loath to change because we've kind of figured out, we've cracked the code of life. And I think for the vast majority of people that holds true. We are creatures of habit.
about the anecdotal thing. If you replace the word people with the word I, with what you just said, it would be a story from within the deep regions of your chest. Yeah, all right. You figure things out for the rest of your
Okay,
life
like I
at a
said,
certain age, and
I
that's it.
might try something new in my life, but that doesn't mean I changed my way of thinking, right? Think about our father. Think about someone of a more advanced age. Do you think that you could teach that old dog new tricks?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I
Oh,
can teach
really?
that whole dog new tricks. I don't know about this. This has gotten extremely personal right now, and I think
Well,
we
I'm
talk
just
about our
saying, so we
father
might not
in a
be
different
as old
platform.
as dogs that we're talking about here, but I think that once we established our habits and our patterns, it's very difficult to allow anyone to come in and rattle us. And when I was in Korea, there's
Oh,
this phenomenon that happens with the what they call the haromoni, which are the much older ladies, because they
mhm.
spent their entire life complying to social etiquette and doing everything perfect, everything that's required of them, and really stifling themselves in the process. And then they reach a certain age, and it seems to be like around 70, 68 or 70. And all of a sudden, these women, they let their hair go, they start letting cigarettes hanging out of their mouth. They dress like scarecrows, and they just have this, like you said, I don't give a f attitude. And I don't know. In that case, it seems like it is a new trick, right? Because the old trick was just simply compliance and falling into line.
Well, you're arguing my point. And you know what? This thing about not giving an F, yeah, I congratulate these Korean women that reach a point where they let their hair grow out. But you don't have to look like a scarecrow. You can look like a goddess.
Okay, they do not look like goddesses. They look like scarecrows that crawled out of a cornfield. Can systemic
Oh,
racism be eradicated? Now, you know what we're talking about in terms of systemic racism, right?
yeah, I do.
Okay, well, for the viewing public, let me explain it just in case someone out there does not. But racism, yeah, of course, exists in the hearts of people, whether it's learned or I don't know if you can even be born with racist attitudes, but people are racist, but our entire systems and institutions can become racist. And that's what the Black Lives Matter movement was, kind of a movement against the systemic racism that exists within the police force of America, because it seemed like the racism within people spilled over into on the institutional level, where these people, Black people and brown people in America, were no longer being protected by the police that were sworn to protect them and also paid by their tax dollars. Instead, they were brutalizing them and killing them. And we didn't learn about this, the reality of what was happening, until everybody started videotaping with their cell phones. So I guess in that sense, the cell phones have made us smarter. And in any case, is it possible to eradicate systemic racism?
I want you to go first, Tamer, please.
All right. Well, in that case, let me think here. I think it's a tough question either way to defend the position of. I'll take the.
Yeah.
I'm going to say yes. I think it can be eradicated. For the most part, I don't think you can eradicate racism from the hearts of people. And people are racist for all sorts of different reasons. Some people inherit it from their parents, and some people have a terrible experience with a certain culture group, and some people don't know how to treat people, and they just sort of categorize them according to cultural stereotypes. But can racism be eradicated from a system, an institution like the government or the police force? I say yes, because those systems have jobs, and you can simply remove someone's job, and that motivation, I think, is strong enough for people to reevaluate their racist views, and whether they want to keep those views private or let them spill over into the workplace. So I think just as long as we're dealing with a system like the police force, and someone's entire career and livelihood hangs on the line, and you can remove that from them, I think that's going to be a strong motivation for people to think twice before being racist.
I admire, your optimism, or maybe a lot of people might say sense of idealism when it comes to your view. Yes, systemic racism can be eradicated. I have to say, I don't believe it can at all. Because if the Black Lives Matter movement, a huge part of it was even just raising awareness of systemic racism, in the year, 2023, where we're at right now, yeah, then there's no chance of it being eradicated. We've got awareness. Are you kidding me? Yeah, duh. We know that there's racism in institutions. And if those institutions had been doing their jobs, then there wouldn't be now, would there? Because we've been knowing about racism for a very long time. So,
well, I'm a
proponent
of the idea where there's a light switch that can be turned off, there's one that can also be turned on. And so 20 years ago, when we were kids, there was so much pollution and people throwing paint into the ground, and kids smoking in the schoolyards. But attitudes changed, and there's smoking has become a taboo simply because people's attitudes have changed over time.
Smoking might have become a taboo, but I'll tell you, vaping hasn't. If it's not one thing, it's the other. The point is, people are always going to satisfy their very own urges. And if their urge is to be racist or to feel superior to somebody else, and that type of urge, the gratification of which has been not just congratulated, but supported by society through systemic racism, then they're going to do it.
I also think that we're dealing with a whole new crop of kids coming up, this next generation, that are much more conscientious and aware of inequities and things like that. All right. Well, we ran out of time. Do you have anything to say on the matter besides what was already said?
Man, institutionalized racism, I really do hope that it gets eradicated. If it does, it would be a miracle to me in my mind. But I know it's not going to be in my lifetime for sure. Which doesn't mean that I won't use all of my lifetime to make sure that it is eradicated, of course.
Well, I can tell you that the institutional racism that exists in my friend's man cave in the neighborhood has become eradicated simply by my presence, because nobody is racist when I arrive in that garage. Let me tell you, And so
What are you talking about? Tell me more. What happens at the
I'm just saying
institutionalized?
my point is a little bit of training and sensitivity training. And it's not just about kind of thinking. I think a lot of people think if you pick out the racist cops from the system, that all of a sudden the system will not be racist anymore. But it goes further than that. It starts with the training. Like, who's training these cops? Who's condoning these actions? Who's not following up on their crimes? You know what I mean? And so I think the whole system has to be uprooted. And that's what led to the defund or abolish the police movement, which I think was unfortunately named because it gave the wrong impression, but it meant uprooting the whole system and starting from scratch again and doing it right in the first place.
Well, something
But
I've noticed in my branch of work, media, is that the awareness, even in little, very conservative, very predominantly white um, Austria, is the not just awareness, but the implication of diversity, schemes for not just PR purposes for companies, but also truly there is now not just an awareness, but they see that it actually brings profit and dividends to have your consumers look like you, so to speak. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
interesting.
And it also, they say, like, the fish rots from the head down, because I know in America they were actually making huge steps in the right direction until Donald Trump came along and normalized racism for everybody. And everybody who was harboring these secret racist feelings, which used to be relegated to the margins of society, now felt emboldened to be as racist as they like. And all of a sudden this trickled into the institutions. And so just one man kind of undid all the good work that people were doing before. But like I said, where there's a light that can be turned off, there's one that can be turned on. Do you owe your parents for bringing you into this world, or do they owe you?
Cool. I guess I owe my parents for bringing me into this world. Yes.
You chose your side. Hurry up.
Well, I owe my parents a great debt of gratitude for meeting each other and making eyes at each other and then doing the business to create life. And in that instance, it happened to be me. And I owe them because they created a person who, first of all, has tried not to buy into greed and also tried to look at things as the glass half full and tried to be part of the solution and not part of the problem in this world, and tried to do that with humor and grace and a little cha-cha-cha. So yeah, I think that's a good thing all in all. So I owe my parents for bringing me into this world a debt of gratitude, and I owe them a debt of
All
gratitude
right.
for
I
bringing
think
my
that maybe
brother
you're
into
my
it
turn.
too.
My turn. I think you're giving your parents perhaps a little bit too much credit for the good things that happen in your life. It could be that these things are completely coincidental or incidental, or maybe you created opportunities for yourself once they brought you into the world. But just automatically feeling like you owe them a life debt, I think, is giving them way too much credit. I think all respect should be earned and not commanded or demanded. And so, look at the world that they brought us into. They brought us into a world that, according to Stephen Hawking, we have 3 generations left before our species is in like dire straits and we need to look for another planet to live on. And who's going to go live on that planet? Is it going to be you and I? No, we're going to pay for Elon Musk and his buddies to go live on that other planet. But we're going to suffer here in languish as the air gets dirtier, as the food sources get depleted, as our resources get less and less, as our opportunities get less and less. Already today, kids don't have a chance at having a better life than their parents. I think it's the first generation that ever turned out like that in a long time.
Having said all that, we still get to experience the sorrow. We get to experience the tragedy, the self-destructive nature of our planet. And while we're doing that, we also get to turn on the radio. We get
So
to
wait, so
listen
you're
to
saying
music.
that you owe your parents a debt of gratitude for allowing you to experience suffering?
Yes, because in suffering is the knowledge that you are alive.
Well, I
Sometimes
would
it's like
argue
that.
that the suffering happens incidentally. You have to deal with it, whether they, it wasn't by their design. That's like giving somebody credit for something that was just purely coincidental. You know, I don't know. I think if the parents are wonderful and did everything perfect, then maybe. But look at most parents that drag their kids up. Most kids are born by accident and not by design.
I'm gonna kill you.
What? Okay, okay. I'll have to
I
edit that
was
out. I would,
not.
sorry to bring up such strong feelings.
Okay.
We'll move on. We'll move on.